Okay, so I've introduced some terms here, and I want to make sure that we're all on the same page as we move forward. So one of the terms is law. So when I say law, it's short for the law of Moses. The law of Moses is the Old Testament law. It's in the middle of those first 5 books, right, of the Pentateuch. So Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. So mostly in Leviticus, but also in part of Exodus, part of Numbers, and then part of Deuteronomy is the law of Moses. And so this is the law that God gave the Jews, that God gave His chosen people of Israel. And it includes the 10 Commandments, right? Like that's kind of the iconic law. That's the part of it that we all are familiar with. But then there's all sorts of other precepts. I think there's 622 in all. And it includes all of the dietary stuff that we know about Jews, right? Like you can't eat pigs, flesh. Also like legumes and some others. I don't fully know it, but all sorts of dietary restrictions. There was a lot of laws about cleanness and uncleanness that are in there that Christians will kind of troll through there as proof text sometimes. This is unfortunate. That we'll kind of sift through these laws when it's convenient for us to make arguments, for instance, against homosexuality or against, I don't know what. That's kind of the hot topic of our generation. But all sorts of kind of these laws are there in the Old Testament, and we don't really use them as Christians in our faith, and we certainly, most of us as individuals don't make good sense of them. We don't have a good understanding of like this corpus and what we're supposed to do with it. So for us to dabble, I think, is I don't know, kind of a dubious move to just kind of sift through there and kind of explore that, right? Because so we're quick to say, oh, God said there shouldn't be gay people getting married, but we'll say that as we're eating bacon for breakfast, so like. And it's not necessarily different, right? I mean, that's the other interesting thing is like how the sins are explained and how the consequences are doled out in this part of the Old Testament. It's rather foreign to us, and that's okay actually because we've been freed from the law. We've been freed from the law, but this is the law I'm talking about. So it's the law of Moses. It's back there mostly in the book of Leviticus. It covers how Jewish people live. And it also covers a lot about temple worship and sacrifices and making amends. So if you have to make a Thanksgiving offering, you bring your cereal and burn it at the altar. Or if you have to make a sin offering and a guilt offering and bring your sheep. Or after you have kids, you bring the 2 turtle doves. Or a pair of doves, not turtles, a pair of doves. So all these things are laid out there. So this is the law, and it's an intact system. So there's the law. Sin is not very clear. It's a term that really gets defined in Christianity in the New Testament, but it's sort of this idea of missing the mark, of somehow being not in good standing, being kind of out. Other things. Oh, and then we've introduced death, right? We've introduced this idea of death, sort of, and we'll look at it quite a bit more now. But what is death? And so the simple answer is the end of life, physical death. And is it problematic? I think is the real question is it problematic? And we're going to explore that. But in the Old Testament, it was not necessarily problematic. It wasn't necessarily a consequence and something to be avoided. There was never a clear option to avoid death, right? There's never this like grasp of immortality, except maybe in the Garden of Eden, and it didn't work. Right? Maybe Adam and Eve made their one bid for immortality and failed. But otherwise, death is there. Physical death is there, and it's not necessarily problematic. It's very ambiguous. Abraham dies a good death, right? And in fact, most of us as Christians would still agree that a death like Abraham's, to be surrounded by loved ones and to die at old age, a peaceful, quiet death, is not an unpleasant thing, right? This is whether it's a debt that we have to pay or just the end of biological life and a fact. It is a fact. That isn't so bad.